our focus, now that the announcement has been made, is going to be on working with the peaks and working with services, working with CHPs and LAC and other agencies to really come up with a good strategy for rolling this out so that we could get good outcomes. So I don't have all of the answers, but that's a good thing in a way, because we need to have those discussions and come up with the answers. So I might cover both announcements. So there was actually an announcement on the weekend as well as the one yesterday. So just covering off the housing announcement on Saturday with the Treasurer and the Ministers Pavey and Henskins. So the headline there was $183 million to fast track, I think, more than 1,400 new homes. That included $50 million to accelerate about 2,800 homes under Communities Plus. So that'll obviously be led by the Land and Housing Corporation, but there will also be, partnerships with both private and community housing providers. And the focus there is Western Sydney, Wagga and Coffs Harbour, certainly noted. That 2,800, my understanding, includes 1,000 social housing homes. Also in that announcement on the weekend, this one I'm more excited about, is the Community Housing Innovation Fund money. So you'd be aware, hopefully, that we had a really successful first round of the Community Housing Innovation Fund out of, I think, about $23 million, delivering 171 properties, attracting co-contributions through the community housing providers of, I think, around $60 million from memory. So we found that was a really effective model. It was oversubscribed. There were lots of great projects that couldn't get funded in the initial round. So the government's now committed an additional $50 million, which will help us bring a lot of those great projects to fruition. I think that what needs to happen now in that area is, and DCJ's already started working with CHPs on just understanding where a lot of those projects are up to today, because the tender process was about 6 months ago, and some projects might have developed through their planning permissions and things like that. So just understanding where everything's up to, but that's a really positive announcement. There's also a number of announcements around Aboriginal housing. So on top of the $50 million Community Housing Innovation Fund, there's an additional $20 million for the Aboriginal Community Housing Investment Fund. There's a further $20 million to deliver 45 new homes for large Aboriginal families. So that's related to kinship care arrangements and to support the Closing the Gap targets around reducing overcrowding, making sure people have appropriately sized housing. There's also an additional $3 million to support around 130 additional vulnerable Aboriginal families with through the Services Our Way program. On top of all of that, there is $30 million for about 80 new small-scale social housing units, Western Sydney and regional New South Wales being targeted. So those will be similar to, I think, what we were previously calling the new generation boarding house type models, co-living arrangements. We've had some really good examples of those smaller units being appropriate for older women and other cohorts. So this is just additional funding to continue developing those types of models. And there's also in that $183 million package, $10 million to continue rent choice youth package, rent choice packages overall, would include things like rent choice youth and Start Safely. So that's good. There's been consistent stimulus funding around rent choice, so that just allows us to continue those packages over the next 2 years. So that 183, it is really about bringing forward things that are already in the pipeline, and it's over this year and next year. And that really covers off a lot of the housing aspect. And then yesterday's announcement, which is, the showstopper number, with the Premier, Treasurer, AG and Minister Taylor was $484.3 million for domestic violence. That is all brand new money. That is over 4 years, commencing from 1 July 2022. So there's a bit of time to figure out exactly how that all plays out, but obviously there's appetite to start anything we can as soon as possible, and there's already a few projects in the pipeline in this space as well. So included in this, and I'll start sort of smallest to largest, there is $5.2 million in there for 2 trial sites for an accompanied children and young people program. So that's really about having that specialist casework in place for accompanied children and young people experiencing homelessness, particularly those impacted by domestic and family violence. It's $5.2 million for 2 sites over 4 years. It's not huge money, but it's proof of concept money. It's an opportunity to try it and demonstrate what works, so that we can support, more work in this space. There is $52.5 million, again, over 4 years, again, for the Community Housing Innovation Fund. So 50 million on Saturday, 52.5 yesterday. This time with a specific focus on housing outcomes for women. So that 52.5 with the community housing sector is there to deliver around 200 social and affordable housing dwellings for women experiencing DV, but also related cohorts, potentially older women, single women, women with kids, just looking at the types of housing that we need for these cohorts. And then the big one, 426.6 million, struggled to actually say that number, is the core and cluster investment. So that's the delivering around 75 extra women's refuges across the state, following that core and cluster model. And obviously, Housing Plus are going to be able to talk a lot about what that model means and how they've implemented it in the Orchard. But I think that's sort of the gold standard. It can be implemented in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of work to figure out exactly what we need in different locations, what type of model is going to work, how it all interacts with the existing service system. And so those are probably all your questions, and they're all the questions that I don't have answers to, other than a commitment that with you to try and just you go.
No, you just froze. So that was me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's me, not you. Don't worry. You keep going, Matt.
Okay, no worries. Look, I don't have a lot more to say on the core and cluster because you'll hear more about specific models, but it really is about that next step in what we need out of crisis accommodation for people in extremely difficult circumstances. It's about providing dignity and privacy and spaces for families to be together and to heal, as well as being able to access the support that they need. So it's a really positive thing. It's going to be a lot of work over the next 4 years.
Thanks, Matt. That was actually a very good overview. Please feel free. There's no questions so far in the chat, so feel free to put some in. I might start. Just in terms of the funding for children and young people, is it decided upon which areas? Is there going to be differences in the 2 areas?
I think the idea is to have sort of a metro and a regional split. I mean, that's fairly typical in the way we would try and do things. But I think it's all to be worked out. And I know that there'll be questions about, is it attached to existing services? We need to work that out.
Yeah. So this is a great question, Debbie. Thank you, Debbie Georgopoulos from Women's Housing. She said, amazing announcement, but she's also just asked about the split between capital for the 426.6 million and the support component, and whether that's been considered or thought through.
Yeah, I don't have the exact split in front of me, but obviously the capital sort of front loaded while we get things developed, and then further down over the 4 years, we'd have the support components coming in, and like exactly what it's going to look like will, we need to take other aspects of the service system into account as well. So yeah, there's a lot to be worked out, but there's certainly the support component there.
Great. And now there's some great questions coming, so I'm going to start firing them at you, Matt. So Michael Starr is asking, so the expectation around July 2022, is it that there will be something up and running, or will the funding flow? So is there a kind of phasing over the 4 years?
Yeah, it's a commitment over 4 years. So the 484.3 million is over 4 years. And that the first financial year is the year starting 1 July 2022. So the money sort of starts 1 July next year, over 4 years. But I know even in the announcement that was made yesterday, we had the Premier and others, really wanting to move things along. So I think anywhere where we can move things forward, we'd be looking to do that. But again, not at a ridiculous or
not at a pace that makes it not work as well as it could, perhaps. Sure.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can do it that way. Now we've got a number of people asking the question. From a range of areas across New South Wales. So hello to everyone. But it's about, is this 75 new core and cluster models, or is it also looking at refurbing and redeveloping existing refuges? There's lots of comments about the current refuges not being fit for purpose. And so what's the thinking around that?
Yeah, so some of the money I know is identified for some refurbishments, a small number of refurbishments. That's in addition to the new ones. That doesn't eat into them, the 75-ish. The commitment that's been made and the money that's been put on the table is for new services, but we really need to look at what we have in the existing system, where we might have, fit for purpose dwellings, or where we may not. I think we would be looking at significant uplift in capacity ultimately. And we need to make those decisions almost on a case-by-case basis. But I think the important message is it's new money for new capacity in the sector. It's not trying to put any existing services at risk, but there's huge opportunity for existing services to both get improved capacity, improved facilities, and to sort of work with other agencies in new ways in the future while we roll this out.
Yeah, so, and I'm just going to add to that as the Peaks, we will be advocating for, making sure that we're providing the best possible services for clients. So that would, we think, include uplift conversations from existing services. And so I think too, what we need to take from Matt's overview too is that we have real opportunity here as communities to really be pushing for what works best in your community. So thinking about that now, I think is really important. Just around, there's a question around the split for the core and cluster model. Is it regional, rural, metro? What's the thinking?
I know that across both announcements, there's going to be a really strong focus on regional areas, but obviously needing to balance that with where the demand is and where we can have the best impact. So I think it all comes back to the analysis and the discussions we need to have about where the need is, to identify the locations, and then think about what new investment might interact with existing services. So there will definitely be a focus on the regions, but by no means are we excluding Metro.
Yeah, okay. There's some questions about the tender process and the thinking around how that will work. Yeah, so it's going to be procured by DCJ, is that right? And what is the thinking around the tender process?
The thinking is that we'll need one, and that we need to come up with a plan for one. It's a lot of money. It's new money and new services. So we obviously need to go through a transparent process that makes sure we get the most appropriate provider delivering it. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to input into exactly what that looks like, I would say.
Okay. And just concerned, I think people might be a little bit worried about their own funding and their own service delivery and the impact potentially on that. If you could just, I guess, answer again around the new money component of this and what the impact might be on the current services, please, Matt.
Yeah, sure. You currently have contracts that are funded and the services that you're delivering. This is completely separate. This is new money for new refuges, new services. That doesn't mean that you're excluded from it. It doesn't mean that we're going to build a refuge next door to yours that's going to make yours redundant. Like that, none of that is at issue. It's a new investment. We need to figure out how it rolls out across the state. It's a significant amount of money. It's a significant uplift in the capacity of the sector. So yeah, I think we just need to look at it as a really positive opportunity. And as Katherine said, be thinking about what the need is in your community, what you think might work, what you need, and making sure that you're communicating that through your DCJ contacts, through your peaks, to whoever you need to communicate that through. But yeah, just to be really clear, this isn't in any way touching your existing services.
Great. And now we have a question about the housing announcement, so that's good. Just around looking at LAC, looking at changes around their small scale direct dealings policy to enable some innovative proposals to be provided. I think the broader question around that too, Matt, might be, it's going through the CHIF and what was tendered through previously. Will there be opportunity for people to submit like additional innovative proposals through that CHIF process?
I think we need to look at what's already in the pipeline first. So we have already gone through a competitive and sort of finalized market process. So there are sort of, to use the phrase, shovel-ready projects there that have the tick from government. And what this announcement on Saturday has delivered is the additional capital to get those projects going. If it turns out that, maybe there's money left over, we'll have to look at what else might happen there. But yeah, just the announcement for the 50 million for CHIF is really about bringing forward those existing projects. The additional CHIF, the 52.5, that I would think has to be a new process.
Great. And there's a question around, will this process be managed centrally, or are you thinking of looking at using the districts to manage this?
Which process?
The funding, the core and cluster funding, sorry.
Right, that's okay. There's quite a lot of processes to put in place. No, that's okay. Look, I don't think there's an answer for that exactly. It's almost a step or two ahead of where we are right now. I mean, districts are obviously going to be really closely involved in sort of identifying and what the local need is and working directly with services. But in terms of, how we roll out a procurement exercise, I think we're a way off answering that.
Great. Are there any more questions for Matt around any of this? Yeah, there will be many more opportunities, don't worry, I'm sure, to have input and conversation and consultation around how this will all work. So this really was just to give you an overview of both announcements, and get you to start thinking about what your community might need and how it might work. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done. I have a question, Matt, which you're probably not going to appreciate, but just around the current contract and the contracts and the program of work that's kind of linked to the SHS program and how that fits with this new funding, and what, if there's any thinking around how it all will come together.
You're talking about like the work on the outcomes.
Yeah,
And
and the work towards the end of the contracting period around what will look like in, you know, the end of this contracting period.
Look, I think there's again, there's a few things to do between now and then. No, I don't really want to, you know, start talking about what the next round of contracts are going to look like. There's evaluation work and consultation that needs to happen.
Yeah, I guess I just meant more, is that going to incorporate the fact that there is this huge influx of funding as well? And don't worry, we can talk about this over many years, I am sure.
Yeah, look, ultimately, this is a huge investment in the sector. It really does, as I've said a couple of times, it's, you know, drastically going to change the service landscape for domestic violence in New South Wales. It would make sense that at some point we'd be, you know, thinking about how that all looks in terms of a program approach and contract approach. But yeah, we're years off that.
So now there's another question now just around whether the funding is focused on core and cluster and refuges, or is there is it also going to look at things like men's behaviour change programs and other aspects of domestic and family violence?
Look, I think there have been other announcements around the broader domestic violence and men's behavioural change space, but yeah, this announcement is specifically about the core and cluster.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll give everyone 1 minute to type rapidly for any last questions that you might have. But as I said, this is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. It's incredibly exciting in terms of what is possible. We so rarely get additional funding that I'm sure we're all in a little bit of shock. But just, you know, it's really just to encourage us all, as Matt pointed out, still working within a COVID environment, still a very highly stressed and very exhausted sector, but to, you know, maybe when we get holidays over Christmas, start thinking about what we could be doing in the future that would really make a difference. So yeah, so really that's thank you very much, Matt. That was a really good overview, and it's good to, I think it will be great to be working together over the next little while to really make this work really well and really make a difference for women and children experiencing domestic and family violence. So it's highly exciting. And also the housing, you know, any more housing is always welcome. Of course, we could do with a lot more investment in social housing, both for women and children escaping domestic and family violence and more broadly, but it's still great to see some steps towards that as well. So thank you very much. It was great to have you. And yeah, and so now we might move over to David Fisher, who's the CEO of Housing Plus, and Penny Dordoy, who is manages the, I think I'm going to say the wrong thing, Penny, but I'm pretty sure it's the community services program part of Housing Plus, who have very, very generously agreed to just provide an overview of their experience in developing a core and cluster model in Orange. So over to you guys.
Katherine, thanks for the introduction. Has that presentation come up on your screens yet?
Yes, it has.
Okay. I hope. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to begin by an acknowledgement of the lands that myself and Penny are joining you on, and that's the land of Wiradjuri people here in the Central West, and pay my respects to elders past, present, emerging. Yeah, I mean, we were excited to say the least. I think there was a few tears in Housing Plus when the announcement was made recently. It's certainly a generational change, and could be seen in years to come as being a real step change in how we support victims of domestic abuse in the state. So it's fantastic news. Penny and I would just like to share a little bit of experience of our own experiences in building a core and cluster facility in Orange in the Central West. By no way are we experts, but it is it's just our experience of doing it. I believe we were one of 6 pilots under the previous Minister Goward. She announced a pilot for core and cluster DV accommodation, and Housing Plus was one, I think, of 6. I'm not so sure about the details of that, but and I think we might have been the only one who got funding to do a purpose-built refuge. So it'll be a double act. I'll pass between ourselves, myself and Penny, and maybe just start by saying a little bit about Housing Plus. So we operate out in the Central West. We're a not-for-profit. I've got a very upset dog today. We're a community housing provider. We're also a specialist homeless service provider. And for the last 10, 12 years, we've been a domestic family violence provider. And maybe, Penny, you could say a little bit about the DV services that we provide while I get rid of this little dog.
Sure. So we provide the WDV CAS in the Central West and Western New South Wales. Our Operation Courage service is the SHS service, but it's the domestic violence arm of the SHS. So we just have that split up, and the DV part of that operates within the Orchard, and the Orchard is our core and cluster model. It's what we call it, the Orchard. Staying home, leaving violence service, and then we've just become a provisional provider of men's behaviour change. So we just deliver that in Orange, in a provisional, as a provisional provider.
Okay, Pen. So what does the Orchard look like for us? Well, that's a picture of the Orchard. It opened in October last year. I'll say a little bit about the history quickly in a moment. I think what defines it is both the design, importantly the location. The Orchard here in Orange is right in the middle of an existing neighbourhood. It's not isolated. It's very well known. It's very accessible. It was built on a co-funding model, so we will go into that again in a little bit detail in a moment. So we received funding from New South Wales through that core and cluster pilot. We also received funding from the Commonwealth, and about a third of the funding came locally from school children, schools, community groups, the coffee shops. Any of you who have been in Orange in September, we run an annual kind of coffee shot of support, it's called. We thought that was quite neat, shot of support. And for every coffee given on that day, there's $1 comes to Housing Plus. A lot of it is about awareness raising and stuff that everybody does, but that's what we were doing. So it's co-funding. It was about 30% locally funded through the community, 30% state and 30% Commonwealth. It's very embedded in the community. I think it's fair to say that, Penny, that kind of developed as we went into this project 3 or 4 years ago. It started with awareness raising, it became fundraising, and now it's very much volunteers and part of how we operate the Orchard. And then there's obviously a service delivery aspect to it as well. So we're going to try and cover all 4 of them now, if that's okay. So yeah, that handsome chap in the kilt is me. I kind of photobombed them, as you can see. Those wonderful women as our fundraising committee, a pretty formidable bunch, and they've been raising funds for the Orchard for the last couple of years, and we hold an annual white tie ball. As I say, we do a whole lot of fundraising and awareness raising in Orange, and we thought that was really, really important. And some of those individuals have been advocating for accommodation in Orange for 20 years. And so they're really, they're really strong advocates for women and victims of domestic abuse. One of the startling facts for a few people is that Orange has double the state average of DV for such a nice, pretty place, but actually it has quite a serious level of domestic family violence. Housing Plus in 2015 kind of stepped into that and formed a roundtable of government departments and other service providers to see what we could do by way of service provision. And one of the priorities was accommodation. And then since that, we've been advocating for accommodation for victims in Orange pretty much since 2015 incessantly. I mean, it's probably a fundamental part of my job. When I was appointed to Housing Plus, this was the project that I was given by my board. And then in October 2020, the Orchard opened. It opened officially with the Attorney General and all of the government ministers, but actually we took our first clients in early 2021. And we used that intervening period just to test the facility, test ourselves, make sure our processes and procedures were correct. And this was a big step for Housing Plus. We operate a men's refuge, but I mean, maybe Penny, you want to say it was a step for us to step up to both conceive it, but actually to run it.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have the Weary Refuge, which is for adult men and appropriate for some women, but not all. And that is a bit more self-sufficient. And we hadn't done any women and children's refuge before. As soon as you're working with children, of course, it just becomes a whole new ball game. And just the scope of this project, I guess, and you'll see, but it's a much bigger sort of project than our existing refuge.
Go for it, quick. Yeah, thanks, Penny. So that's the kind of background to it. Let's see if I can move us on. Seems to be frozen for a moment. There we are. I mean, what are we trying to achieve? It's the things that everybody on this video link do every day. It's about increasing safety for women and children, increasing access to support. So one of the key features is a combination of services that Penny and her team provide on site, but there's also a lot of in-reach services by alcohol and drug, mental health services and others. And as we went through the design process, we were engaging with those providers to determine exactly what they needed, so that the core, which is the picture you see there, the core building meets their needs as much as it meets our own organisational needs. Obviously, the focus is on building independence and supporting women leaving this emergency accommodation and becoming more independent. And not only is the location important for us, but how that community support that takes place, I think, is really important for victims. Let's see if I can move us on. Okay, so it is a pilot. It was one of the 6 pilots, I think, that was funded. There's a core to it, and it's a communal building, as you probably already know, and apologies again for covering things that you already know, but the core consists of, as you see in the picture, a large communal lounge, communal kitchen, and for group work, those meetings take place in the morning. Some of the support takes place in a communal setting. A lot of it takes place in an individual one-to-one setting, and I think that's one of the features of this approach. The core consists of counselling rooms, family observation rooms. One of the rooms has AVL links to the court, so it's not just accessible for clients who are resident at the Orchard, it's also accessible and for clients across Orange. There's stand-up accommodation. There's office accommodation. There's a whole variety. There's an IT hub in there. We kind of threw everything at it. that we could conceive. We engaged with stakeholders, and we'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but we tried to put in as much as we could. The cluster consists of 6 2-bedroom units, and they are, as it says, clustered around the core, and it's landscaped, secure accommodation. And I think the focus of the cluster are the units are all private units with front and back doors, front and back gardens, to encourage and provide independence, which we again think is very, very important, and maybe is a departure from other refuges. Jump in, Pen, if I'm missing anything.
Well, I guess just one of the great things about having the individual units is that you can work with the person or the mum and the children in the unit as a family, and in a home that replicates what they might have on the outside. So rather than kind of, and you can establish routines, and you can get things, you can sort of put in safety plans that can be used when they leave the orchard. So it's really about having a front door and a back door and a laundry and a full kitchen and all the things that they're fully equipped homes that are all located on the same sort of land as a communal setting as well. So for women and children who need more support, they can go to the communal space, and we do things there such as some cooking classes or some living skills or some stuff for the children, or it might just be the which is all stuff that I know that you do in traditional refuges, but I guess the difference is being able to go back to your own independent unit, implement some of those things there, test them, bring someone in from the core, so from staff, to come in and help you in that setting, and people, women really love it. They love having their own kind of home, but also feeling safe and secure on the being on those grounds, and children love it because they've got their own home, but they've also got additional supports. Women can have, you've got the best of both worlds. So you've got the great support from everything happening, in the core, but you've got your own privacy, chance to recover, time to have space to yourself. The kids have their own backyard, and it's just it's a beautiful environment for everyone. It's gated. It's gated. So we've got all the security that you would have. We've got a fob system to let people in and out, and a intercom. So you come in, you park once you're inside, and then once you're inside, you have access to everything. Sorry, I just saw one of the questions come up, so I just thought I'd answer it.
Yeah, it was a kind of challenge for us as we went through the design process. We wanted to make it, I mean, I think Matt mentioned gold standard, but we wanted to make it a really well-designed building that looked to a large extent like any other multi-unit development in Orange. But with all this, so there's a degree of openness to it. As I say, it's very well known in Orange, but it's very secure. So, that's cameras, and it's all passive, so it's not necessarily obvious, but it is there. We took a lot of advice. One of the consultations that we had throughout was with New South Wales Police and their safety by design guidelines. We also worked closely with the Orange Aboriginal elders, and they were fantastic. Gave us a really hard time, but they really had a lot of input into the design, as did a number of our services, a number of our clients as well. So it's kind of designed in a way that security is built into the design. And there's facilities in there. I think that picture there is of a boutique. This was when we just opened, so it's not like that now. It's like anybody else's house. It's full of stuff, much more than it was on its first day. but there's a boutique in there and a salon. And I'll maybe come on to that a little bit later about back to community engagement and how other community groups in Orange are helping victims. But it was all about trying to create a safe and healthy environment. Okay, I'll keep going. As I said before, the government stepped in. We were very fortunate. We were already embarked on designing and building something of this nature in Orange, and then the New South Wales government announced that pilot for core and cluster, and we were able to quickly present a business case and take advantage of that funding. We were using Building Better Regions Fund, which is a Commonwealth fund, and we secured funding through that. And broadly, it was a 30% each, 30% from Commonwealth, 30% from New South Wales, and then the rest came from community groups. And I think one of the first grants that were contributions, donations that we got was from the local high school. A bunch of the senior school young women at the school had heard about the project, and they came up with a check for a couple of $100, and that school and the senior girls at that school have supported the orchards since then. So we've had a lot of the schools involved. We have a lot of businesses involved, a lot of individuals as well. And in terms of funding, as you would appreciate, depending on individuals' circumstances, a small charge can be applied. I've mentioned community engagement a few times. At times it was really quite challenging because we had to go through the planning process. It wasn't without its challenges. I think at some points it was very, very challenging for my colleagues. And even doing the kind of weekly shop at Woolies, people were feeling quite uncomfortable for a while because it was really quite tense. We knew that if we could get to the stage where we were building it and opening it, a lot of that tension would go, and that has been the case. But in the run up to it, it was difficult through the planning process. But the majority in Orange, we had widespread support. And what we found as we were doing that awareness work with the coffee shops and the white tie balls, as I say, it was gathering kind of momentum. What we found is a lot of people were saying, well, we're happy to donate, but actually I would equally like to give some of my time. And that kind of fed into some of the design aspects of it, such as the salon and the boutique. So there's a couple, I think Zonta runs a boutique, and a couple of the hairdressers come and do some pro bono work. Obviously, we kind of worked our way through the safety aspects of that. That picture there is the volunteers from the local gold mine, Cadia, that some of you might be aware of. Anyway, they came and done that garden work. It's just kind of typical. We've got relationships with all sorts of different community groups. The local rugby union club, Orange City, have reached out to us, and they're a very representative team from across the city. They've got children's teams, women's teams, and men's teams, and they want to work with us, and they will. So they're kind of reaching out to the children at the orchard. So I think it's really important, and as you would appreciate, that sense of connection to community helps build resilience and recovery for victims of domestic abuse. So it's something I would say, Penny, would you agree? It's something it kind of evolved as we went in the project. It wasn't something that we had a clear plan of at the beginning. It's just something that evolved naturally, but something that we embraced as it became apparent.
Yeah, I think somebody said in the comments, as I'm watching them as they come up, about being hidden and away isn't always safest, and that speaks to this. I guess we also felt that way, and we're trying to move away, we've been trying to find the balance the whole time of getting the right people and good community involvement in the orchard, because I think if people around the orchard know about it and understand it, then it keeps the people within it safer. And that, I guess, is our thinking behind bringing groups in. It's not just anyone comes in, and this particular group of mines came in before we opened, and it's part of their community engagement. But COVID, of course, like everything, has got in the way of some of the stuff that we started to do. But we have our own, what we call the DV project, which is a training and education program that people who want to come on and do work within the grounds have to go through. And it's all around confidentiality, privacy, what happens if you hear a disclosure and that kind of thing. So, yeah, and it's evolving. And I think we'll probably, I think it will continue to change as we learn more.
I think that picture on the screen, Penny, shows the large core. What it doesn't show is the cluster of units to the right-hand side or to your left-hand side. And the way I would describe it is, as you come through the gate, it's public. It then becomes semi-public. The core is kind of semi-public. Halfway through the building, it becomes very secure and private. And as you go into the rest of the site where the units are, it's exclusively private. So there's, I think, there's limitations to which parts of the orchard people will ever have access to. And the clusters won't be part of that. It'll be the more communal public parts. But it's just like Penny said, we've got the Rotary Club wanting to run barbecues. We've got people want to help out the IT suite that's in there. And I think it does bring advantages. In terms of the service model, Pen, do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So, sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments. So, look, we have all of our services so we're a bit unique in that Housing Plus has the WD, as I said earlier, has those sort of DV specific services as well as providing the accommodation. So we provide our services all of our services from the communal area, and that just provides additional support for clients. So our SHS DV of the SHS is run from the orchard, so any case management is provided there. We have we have night staff, so we have a sleepover room. So we have somebody staying over at night, leaving in the morning, and then our day staff coming in the next day. We also have, because we have the SHS, we have a 24-hour on call. But the orchard is, as David was saying, it's somewhere for our people to stay and provide and receive all the services at the location, but also for day people to come and use the orchard. So the communal spaces might be able to be used by people who perhaps aren't too sure yet, or they can get out for the day and during the day, or maybe while the kids are at school, and they can come and have a cup of tea in our communal area and talk to other people, talk to services and hear more about it. So we're trialling not experimenting, safely experimenting, I guess, with a few different ways. We have our AVL. So the idea is we want women initially to stay at the orchard, and while we safety plan and get everything right. So, if in an ideal world for me, it'd be for the first week, we want people just to come in, we'll bring all the services to them, we'll safety plan, you don't have to leave, we've got food, we've got everything you need for now. And that includes any court appearances. So we've got the AVL, and we have used that. As I said, we've only had clients since February, so this is all sort of quite new for us as well. And then we bring services in, and the intent is that they'll build relationships with those services, and that will establish that connection for outside. And when they leave, those connections are already built. And so hopefully that fosters a long-term connection with services. Thanks.
Maybe just jump on. I'm conscious of time, PD.
Sorry.
So individually, so the community, Orange Community, have funded things like the playground, the Aboriginal Women's Healing Room, and designed that, vegetable garden, yarn and circle, and so on and so forth. There's some specific things that different groups within the community wanted to fund. And where are we else? These are aspects of the service that might be different to some refuges. Certainly we include older children, including boys, we include pets, and that recent funding round allowed us to buy a few kennels and the other things. And yeah, I'm not going to go through each of the bullet points, but I think it does bring a different offer to victims. And then some of the quotes that I'm sure you see and hear every week in the services that you provide, but that's some of the feedback that we've received in the short time that we've been open. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Penny and David, for that. It was really, really interesting. And unfortunately, due to COVID, no one's been able to come and visit really to see it when, I mean, I remember the launch and the long and hard work you did in getting this together over a number of years. I should also mention that Linking Communities in Griffith also has a core and cluster that's been funded in through the same process. And there are, I'm aware of other core and clusters that are in existence in New South Wales as well. And I know, David, you spoke to me yesterday about really being open to having further discussions with people who are interested. And I think what we might do is connect up with the other services who also have core and cluster to really see if we can share the knowledge that we already have within New South Wales around this.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Katherine. We would be happy to do that. There's only so much you can cover on a presentation.
Yeah, that's right.
I just noticed there's a comment in the chat about LAC doing some core and cluster modelling, and certainly we have inputted into that work. And just for everyone's information, we just received, Housing Plus has just received a little bit of funding from one of our peaks, CHIA, and we're developing an architectural guide for core and cluster designed accommodation. And that work's now commissioned, and we should have that ready probably in the early 2022, and that'll be a public document for everyone.
Fantastic. And we should also please all note that Victoria, our friends in Victoria have been rolling out a core and cluster model for some years. And so it would be great for us to connect up with Victoria as well and really learn from their experiences on a large scale rollout of core and cluster as well. So we'll look into talking to our colleagues. I usually talk to them about the ERO. It would be nice to talk to them about something positive. So yeah, we'll definitely follow that up and share that information as well. It's 4 o'clock. This is all food for thought. I hope you're feeling really positive and have lots of thinking about what could be possible in the next couple of years around this approach, and really making a huge difference in how we support women and children who have experienced domestic and family violence. Thanks to all of you who've come. There will be much more conversation going forward. We have recorded this as well, and we'll put this on our website so that it's available for people as well. And we will look to get the people who have had experience with core and cluster together at another time to really share, and hopefully we might even be able to come and visit Orange and Griffith and do some actual physical viewing of how things work as well. Hopefully COVID will go away. Thank you so much, David, Penny and Matt. Really appreciate it. And next week we will look at the roadmap. So please think about what you need to know about in terms of restrictions lifting and how to prepare around the next phase of the pandemic. So have great weeks, and feel free to contact us, of course, around anything as well. Thank you all. See you.